Hello everyone, it's me Tom again, and we're doing another synth tutorial with Massive today. Just very briefly, I'd like to thank you for the positive response on the last one. That's why you're getting another one, so you only have yourselves to blame. Today we're looking at this pad sound from my Skullgirls remix, and yeah, it's not quite as basic as the last one, but it's still pretty straightforward, so let's just take a look at it here. And if we listen to it, and although I've only used it as a monophonic synth in this, you can use it as a polyphonic and it still sounds quite nice. If you play a good... There we go. So yeah, let's dive into a blank patch of Massive and get to it. As before, if you're not interested in the kind of explanation behind the sound, I will put some annotations there and you can jump to each section of the synth. So be right back. So here we are with our blank patch of Massive again. And I've popped an EQ down at the bottom here so you can watch the spectrum as we go about making the sound. So once again, we'll start off with the oscillators. We're going to start with a Groan 2 wave shape. Now if we just take a quick look at this website here, we can see that the Groan 2 is sort of like a sine, but with a bit more characteristic. So if you know, as you move the wavetable position here, you kind of get more changes in the waveform, and this will kind of bring more high harmonics about it. So if we just take a look at that, you can see there you've got that nice sweet spot of high harmonics. So we're going to put that about there, and we'll be modulating this with LFO5. I'm just going to turn this off. We'll be modulating this with LFO5 like this. So we'll leave it in the middle there, and then we'll get the kind of changes between the sharp high and the sort of dollar low sound. We'll put the amplitude to about here, and we'll also modulate that with LFO5. So that it comes in and out, pretty much. So we'll just quickly put some bend on here. Now, without kind of really going into the true specifics of it, the bend dial sort of compresses or extends the wave cycle. So, you know, this would be a lot faster. There'd be more of these, and that's my understanding of it anyway. At least on the bend plus setting that we've gone for here. So that just makes the wave shape a bit tighter. We're going to send that exclusively to filter 1. Moving on to the second oscillator, we're going to use a carbon wave shape. So if we just take a quick look at that. Here we are. And you can see it's sort of like a saw wave shape. If I'm right, is this? Let me just take a double. Yeah, I'm right. So yeah, sort of like a saw wave shape. And as you can see, you know, you've got this more kind of extreme wave shape over here, which will make all kinds of crazy harmonics. But we're going to put, I mean, immediately you can hear that's some really interesting results. We're going to put it about here. There, I think that's just, you've got to be careful obviously with that, because you know, that and that are very drastically different sounds. We'll leave the amplitude as it is. We'll put the bend plus dial on. As you can hear that, you know, adds a lot because we're putting this waveform together, making it a bit sharper. We'll move to, sorry, just very quickly, send that exclusively to filter 1. And we'll move to the third oscillator, which is going to be a pulse width modulation oscillator. And we'll put the pulse width, we'll put the saw position here and the pulse width position over here. So something just a bit more solid, because we are going for a pad sound. We want something quite firm to reinforce our sound. And we'll set the amplitude to about half. And we're going to modulate this with LFO6. So once again, I'm just going to turn that off for demonstration purposes. And just a little bit of modulation on the amplitude there. This is sent exclusively to filter 2. So this is what we've got so far. Let's move over to the voicing tab very briefly. It's got 8 voices, this synth, to make it nice and thick. And quite loud, as you can see. We're going to spread the wavetable position across the voices to get this sound. And as well with the pan position, just to kind of make this nice full sound. You see in the original mix I panned it, I'm not sure if I kind of needed to pan it, but for the mix itself, I had a lot of different sounds, and panning it was one way to move it across. But speaking of panning, we're going to do the same trick as before and just randomize the pan. So you can see, or maybe not. So you can hear it a little bit that it spreads across. I mean, you can get more extreme in that setting if you want to. Obviously, I've panned it in my mix, so I didn't think it was extreme enough. We'll just quickly dial in some settings of the modulation oscillator. We want to detune it an octave, and then a little bit more. And we're going to look at the ring modulation first, and this is actually modulated with the velocity. So without getting into the deep specifics of ring modulation, it will make a lot of kind of more exciting high frequencies. So it's just affecting the first oscillator, and having it affected by the velocity makes sense because a lot of sounds in the real world, and the harder you hit them, the more high frequencies you get. So that's what we've done with this. So we'll move to the phase. We're going to apply to the third oscillator, set it to about here, and then we're going to modulate it with LFO6. So we'll set it like that. We'll move to look at the feedback now, and the feedback is set up like this. Sorry, let's just turn that off a second and listen. As you can hear, that thickens it up massively, especially as we detune that. I'm actually going to move an octave higher because that's closer to what we'd play in the original. So in the feedback over here, that's what it sounds like, and we're actually going to modulate this with LFO5 just a little bit, nothing too dramatic. So that's pretty much all our oscillation settings, if I can put my words together. We're going to move to the filters now and start off with low pass 4. And just quickly, I'll put this in series so that it goes through this filter and then it goes through to this filter. We'll mix between the two like so. So yeah, for this low pass 4, we'll set the cutoff pretty high, and we're going to modulate this with LFO5 so that we really get those high frequencies coming in and out. Maybe a little bit less than that. So then we're going to move to the resonance, and actually I used an envelope for this. So it's sort of weird saying this is an envelope because it's kind of more of an LFO. So I'll set that to infinite, but wipe all of these settings here, and then it's wave shape 10, I believe. Just bear with me a second, which is this one, and turn the S loop to about this, and we'll bring up the level so you can see what's going on. And these settings I kind of find hard, so bear with me, but bring the S loop down because we want it to be quite short. And essentially what we've got here is kind of like an LFO that you can have an envelope for. So because it's looping infinitely, it will do this motion all the time, constantly rising and falling on the resonance. But you can say it will take a while to happen, or it has a release or something. So that's kind of cool. So this is how it should look. There we go. We'll move on to the second filter now. We use a high pass 4, and the cutoff is actually pretty ideal over there. Oh, that's something we don't want to do. And we're going to modulate this with LFO5, like this, and just turn it up a bit, obviously, and set the resonance to about here. So this is what we've got, a nice mixture between high and low. So if we just fade between these so you can hear it, we've got this and this. There's not a huge, this doesn't really add too much, I don't think, but it's because of this LFO, you get kind of a motion that you don't have over here. Now maybe you want to kind of turn down this so you can really hear the difference between those, but for the mix that I was doing, this was ideal because I wanted more of this filter. So that's just something you have to decide on yourselves. So we'll move to the LFO, I think. We'll move to the LFO because obviously I've used it for a lot of things. So let's actually get it working properly. So yeah, amplitude just under half. Same again with the rate, actually, just a little bit lower there. And we won't have a restart with the key press because I like my kind of fluid motion, especially in this kind of dancey track. You know, you don't want to reset every time there's a note because there's a lot of stop-starty notes in here, so having that restart all the time is kind of strange. So yes, with this we want the X fade all the way up, and that's pretty much it for that LFO. Moving on to LFO 6, quite similar settings for the rate and amplitude. So just bring that up a good bit, just below half, and we're going to use a bending 2 curve, and we will set this one. I think is a square wave set like this. So I've moved that wave shape along there. Kind of hard to see from a reference point, but yeah, that's pretty much the LFO sorted. I will have this one restart because I don't know. I probably didn't think about this too much. We'll leave it on for completion's sake, but yeah, I don't know why I've left it on. Envelope 4, so the ADSR envelope, this one's a little bit different. We'll have the attack affected by the key tracking, so as I keep saying, this sound is very much intense, and I wanted it so that the higher you get in the key register, you know, the more things getting intense, especially in this track, you know, the really intense bits here. And they're the shorter notes, so I didn't want any attack with those. So that is why the key tracking is set like this, so that, you know, the higher you play on the keyboard, the less attack you get. Moving on, no decay, full sustain, doesn't really matter if you've got full sustain. Anyway, we'll move on to the S loop, so set this to infinite. I need shapes 8, which is the sine 3.5, and 5, which is the sinoid wave. And if we bring the level down a little bit here, you can see this is pretty extreme, so we're going to morph between these two a little bit, and then we get this kind of falling off that you can hear. And this is happening in the decay stage. I'll give it a little bit of release as well, but nothing too dramatic. And that's where you definitely get that kind of motion that you can hear in this. There you go. So let's move on to the effects section. The insert section. We're going to do a lovely bit of bit crushing. I'm a big fan of bit crushing and massive. I think it really adds a lot. Let's with or without. Yeah, it was a really nice texture. If we just take a good look at the spectrum here. So that's with, and that's without. And there's your with, and you can instantly see there's a lot more content going on here. So this is very important to consider all this while you're designing a synth, because especially in the digital realm, you can really control these harmonics, and it's very good to know what your frequency content is. So we'll move to the actual effects section now. We're going to use some chorus on this, just to thicken it up a bit. And not too much, just set the dry wet just under a quarter here. And these settings are fine, so let's just take a listen to that. I cheated and pressed 2 keys. But you can hear, you know, it's just a lot richer. Again with the really thickens that up in the high end. And for the second effects, we're going to apply some reverb. My advice again with the reverb stands again. As you can see in the mix with this, I've put no reverb on it. I think this reverb is actually pretty dramatic, but the thing is, if you're using a lot of the same synth, then you can kind of get away with using the reverb in the synth. So we'll just drop these settings down a bit. And we're going to have a random amount of color just to keep things moving, because, you know, static sounds are boring, especially if you're holding them down for a long time. So we've covered the voicing tab this time, so I think this really is it. Let's just take a listen. Compared with this. It's pretty much there, not entirely perfect. I think this is just a little bit lower, but yeah, it's the right idea. So I should stop waffling and just end this tutorial. Thank you for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed. I might cover a couple more synths from this song. I guess I'll just let it play out. So if you've got any requests, please let me know. I'm also thinking of doing some like sound effect ones. But yeah, thanks again for watching.